Who are you?
I'm Dr. Bob Hieronimus, a lowly PhD hanging out in Owings Mills in our home here of 20 years.
All right, now give me another one.
I'm Dr. Bob Hieronimus. I'm an artist. I've done a series of murals.
Take that one more time.
Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and I have been artist. Let me put it this way. I'm Bob Hieronimus.
So how much of this is yours? You got 3 acres? Look, what, 4 acres? 5 acres?
I got 40.
You have 40 acres?
This is the most civil area.
Mm-hmm.
This looks like a home here, this part.
Right.
The rest isn't. The rest is like a factory. I'm saving every empty box I can to pack up.
What's the end game for all this packing?
So I know what I'm going to keep with, well, for my memoirs. Like when you look at these are all for my biography, memoirs, all my diaries, more of the memoirs. And it's a far cry from even hardly getting started.
How long have you been working on your memoirs?
For about 6 years.
How long of a book you think it's going to be?
Oh, it's not the size of the book, it's just that I'm rediscovering who I am.
His name is Bob Hieronimus. He is 27 years old, a native of Baltimore, where he lives in this commune called Savitria, a house of the sun. He is a painter, teacher, writer, philosopher. He's a member of the Liberal Catholic Church. He believes in symbology, astrology, extrasensory perception, reincarnation, Christianity, Judaism, the occult sciences, Atlantis, the collective unconscious, Rosicrucianism, and the United States of America.
Historically, artists are paid very little, especially when they begin their work and trying to make a name for themselves. So I always thought that if I had to hire artists, I would pay them as much as I possibly could. We raised the kind of money we needed so that no one worked on this mural that was paid less than $20 an hour. When you talk to any of the artists, you'll find out that's as much as they've ever been paid, period, in their entire life for anything. The very beginning of the Apocalypse mural was obviously, this was the hardest of all, which was getting all of those ideas fitted into an entire room and a half. After that was then figuring out how to relate the story so that the story tells something that you really want to emphasize. Eagle was the emphasis of this entire mural. That's the story, the dying of the eagle and its rebirth. That is, what killed America? What has brought America down?
I've known Bob, I guess, off and on for 10 years. I really can't compare him to any other artist I know. I think he's pretty much of an individual, and I'm sure he'll always remain that way.
The first time I ever thought that I might have been an artist is when I was about 3 or 4 years sitting in the bathtub and put glasses on Donald Duck. One of my sisters came in and said, "Hey, wow, I didn't know Donald Duck wore glasses." And I said, "I drew them." And they said, "Well, you must be an artist." They literally took care of me. So I felt very, very honored, and very, these people I know loved me. My parents never paid any attention to me. So I was absolutely free to go anywhere and think and do anything I want. What I mean by that, I would go out in the middle of the afternoon and take a walk, come back late at night. No one would ask me where I was or what I was doing. And I thought that everybody lived that way. The home I grew up on was on 2930 Greenmount Avenue, and it was opposite the old Oriole ballpark. And there were all kinds of little animals that I fell in love with. They were my friends, basically. And I had some terrible experiences in which I learned that there were some monstrous people that would kill these animals. I had to once work out a deal in which I traded my 2 candy bars, which was a Heath candy bar and an Almond Joy, and that was 25 cents, for a cat. When I walked into the woods over there, and they were about ready to set the cat on fire. And being a very small person, I pleaded with these 3 guys, and I gave them my candy bars, and they gave me the cat. I was approached by a nightclub by the name of the Blackjack, and they wanted me to do a mural on their wall. I called the mural Soul, S-O-U-L. And I had some difficulties with this particular mural because this was owned by a white man, but run by mostly African Americans. I was told by the bouncer, "Please hang up some kind of sheet so that people don't see you working up here." Well, I thought that was kind of silly. I heard noises behind me. I heard a shotgun go off. I didn't know what was going on until I turned and saw the red-orange car go by. They left. The bouncer came out. He said, "Bob, I told you you needed to have a sheet to be behind. If these people come back, they're going to try it again." And he said, "I'll look out for you." And he did. The reason why I felt like I was not going to be stopped by anything like that is because what was the key to the mural? The mural was soul. It was about one people. We are all one people. You can be black, orange, pink, purple, all that other kind of thing, but you were a human being. My goal was to spread that message all the way back from 66 and 67.
Would you set up for your astrological birth time? Now, you tell me what part of the line this is, and I draw this on here. What do you think that is?
I learned that there was a great deal of corruption within this country through corporate powers, and I decided I had to say something about it, but I did not know how to write it, but I could paint it. So I decided I would use my car as a billboard. After they got on several covers of different magazines, I decided then I could then move that into buses, the Volkswagen buses. And a friend of mine, he asked me to paint his car. I did in 1968. I heard about Woodstock, and they said 50,000 people are going to come. And I said, well, I sure as hell am not coming. But the fellow who owned the bus that I painted was going up, It was photographed by the Associated Press and Life magazine and UPI. I had no idea it was becoming famous, and they didn't know who did it. When I did a radio show, they started to recognize I was the same son of a bitch that did that bus. They looked at me and said, "Wow, you're an artist. How would you like to do our record album cover? When do you want to meet Hendrix?" And that's how I got to then spend time backstage with the Doors, a little bit of time with Janis Joplin. What I found out about the world of rock and roll is it is just as corporate as any other large corporation, and it can be very unpleasant. And I decided I was not going to waste my life and energy in a situation like that. There's some pretty neat ones up here. See that one? That was my favorite one, literally, where he put it on a credit card, etc. So I've got to disassemble all of this. I'm tired of living it, and I'd like to. It's time to put it to rest. After spending time with rock and rollers up in New York, I realized I had to return to my art life. I wanted to do murals again. I returned to Baltimore, talked to Dr. Chester Wickwire, who's allowed me to show my artworks in 1966 and 67, and then I accepted the contract to paint the mural called The Apocalypse. This was a great balanced team, hardworking, and we did finish it exactly on time. It was a real rush to the end, meaning that they had to put in overtime, which they weren't paid for. They had to work on Saturdays and Sundays. That was the only way we could finish this piece. You know, we're doing basics. This is not great painting. This is all very simple. I have no interest whatsoever in reproducing what I'm looking on in the outside world. But I got philosophical problems with that because that's not the real world. It's the internal world that is real to me. I'm not interested in trying to make a house look like a house or a person look like a person. And I never even want to look at things as I'm drawing. I want it all come from here, and that's why symbols are very important.
When you look at the art style, it's very simple art. It's very direct, the colors are dramatic. It's basically relatively simple. It's the meaning behind it that's so fantastic. That's what you have to wake up the following day and find out, what did he really do here?
The important thing about being at Hopkins is you have so many scholars and so many visitors that would come up and see the mural. Word was getting around that I was using Hebrew, Egyptian hieroglyphs, Sanskrit and everything. And so some of the professors who took a look at some of my work thought, hey, what does this guy know about these hieroglyphs? What is he saying with them? Was he just making us all up? Fortunately, everything that's up there is accurate in its interpretation, and that was a really good, warm feeling to realize that other scholars looked at it and said, hey, I don't understand your painting here, but what you're saying here is accurate.
What I do before I start a piece of work is that I collect as much information about the subject, be it the Apocalypse or the Lord's Prayer, and then I put all of this information together and I eventually write a book. I'm in the process now of writing 4 different books, so-called raw data.
This is how I do my work. Everything is in these large journals. And this is what the day-to-day of my life is. It's pretty crowded, to see. This one fella came up. Lee was a fundamentalist. And he came in and he knew the term apocalypse. And of course he related it to the book of Revelations. And he came in here and he saw this wall with the eagle on it. And he knew what it meant. He said, "You're not supposed to tell people this, Bob. This is going to happen, but they're not ready. You can't tell people this." And that's why, when I walked up, he was taking these jars and hand grenading each wall, throwing them up against the wall. Fortunately, I jumped them, and I was holding them down, and the police finally came up. And of course they arrested him, and they asked him why. And of course he said the truth. He said, "Look, the apocalypse is all about the end of this earth. And if you tell people that, they will have nothing to live for. Yes, it's going to happen, but don't tell them that." So he was opposed not to the ideas, but the fact that it was exposed.
So this is the beginning of our paint container collection. So we're saving all of the paint containers and signed all of them, so we can give them as little trophies. This was a really fun summer.
Mimics the caduceus.
When I was a kid, I always thought it was cool how in Egyptians they'd paint all that stuff, and then we come later oh my god, what does it mean? And I was like, I want to do that. That looks awesome, because I was obsessed with history stuff like that as a kid. And then while painting here, I was like, oh, it's kind of like that. It's kind of the closest I can get to that in modern day, in a sense.
The best crew of artists I've ever worked with.
He just took that last ladder out, and that whole stairwell's real.
Okay, let's do it. This is it. Now we're... The restoration is a much better restoration than the actual mural because of the number of different layers of colors that we've had. I didn't give anything any 3 coats back there in 1968, 69. I was having a hard enough time finishing this mural in time, and I think that means that it's going to last at least twice as long. I would say 100 years, it'll hang pretty well together into the 80 to 100 years from now, but I don't think our country's going to be hanging together. This building may not even be standing around that time, about 100 years from now. This is the stairwell, the very oldest part of the history of this mural, the Apocalypse. It takes us all the way back to a lost continent called Lemuria. There was a continent on which these beings had direct contact with their soul. And because they had direct contact with their soul, they knew who they were, why they were here, and what they were going to do. This panel is the temple of Atlantis, and it is suffering the same problem that Lemuria did, which was there are these periodic sinkings of all lands, because when they become polluted, they are put under salt water after thousands of years, and then they rise again, and then they can be reused. Now this tells the story here in this Atlantean temple of its sinking, which we are looking at now at this time period, the sinking of all different lands along all coasts because of, well, you may call it global warming, but it's global changes. And that's going to change literally every continent in the world. Now we have just left Lemuria, Atlantis. We come to this ark, which is kind of like Noah's Ark, and we land in Egypt. So this tree is the goodbye, literally, to the end of Atlantis and its civilization moving then into ancient Egypt. And what you also have is a serpent biting its tail. It is one of those symbols of foreverness. You see 3 little UFOs coming out of a mothership. You'll see that repetition of the mothership many times in this mural. 666, isn't that the mark of the beast? Every time you got a series of numbers, you add them. 666 comes out to 18, you add 1 and 8 and get 9. 9 is the sacred number. That's the reason why you would see it above Christos' head. 9 is the key to initiation. Even though we may think we're doing all this ourselves, the truth is there are other beings that we're working with we can't even see or know about, and most people don't believe in them anyway, but you do after you develop higher awareness and consciousness, and that has to do with Scorpio, which is what this being here is here. Scorpio is called the symbol of death in the zodiac. What is the symbol of death? Death has a lot to do with your physical body dying, but you continue on in spirit. 7-pointed stars. You don't normally see 7-pointed stars, but a 7-pointed star is a symbol for initiation and higher consciousness. This Novus Ordo Seclorum is the new order of the ages, and the new order of the ages is a republic. This is not understanding. This is almost like, here's the stuff. Believe it or not. You don't bump into people by accident. We've all known each other somehow before at other times. There's no final story. The final story is the highly development of a spiritual being. That is the end of the story in a certain way, but then you move on to another universe. We're all going to have to face this together.